Welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of Elon University to explore the stories, ideas, and innovations shaping our community. Thanks for joining.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bricks. I'm your host, President Connie Book here at Elon University, and today I'm joined by 1997 graduate of Elon, Joyel Crawford. It's great to see you again. So excited to be able to have this conversation with you today and get an update on all things Joyel Crawford. So for our audience, Joy founded Crawford Leadership Strategies. She had more than 2 decades of experience at Verizon. I remember you talking about that, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that. And she's the host of a very popular Career View Mirror podcast. She's got decades of experience working with organizations and people to help them find clarity and confidence. That's the theme behind her book around being confident and advocating for ourselves. So I'm really excited about having this conversation today. Joy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Book. It's good to be back, mic to mic.
That's right. I had the pleasure, we were in Philly and had the pleasure of speaking with Joy during an alumni event, and which was really great. And then also got to be on her podcast during COVID when we all needed lots of leadership help and guidance. So I was on the podcast, but I was actually getting a lot of great motivation from Joy during I know was a really challenging time for everybody. But let's start with, so you graduate from Elon. Tell me a little bit about that moment and how you landed at Verizon.
You know what? I graduated and I thought I had it all figured out. I'm going to be a guidance counselor. I'm going to go into therapy, psychology major. This was it. And my mom pulled me aside and she's just like, I really, I want you to really go for it. Get your master's degree, find a company that'll, do that for you. And so I started working at Verizon Wireless, right out the gate, right after graduation, and knew from that day, the first day of working at Verizon Wireless, that I wanted to lead and motivate and inspire people from what I saw at New Hire Orientation. And they were training. It was called Learning and Development. And I was like, well, I want to do that.
Yeah, that's the job I want.
That's the job I want. And the people were like, well, that's not what you were hired to do. You were hired to program phones and set up voicemail and pagers. That's how old I am. Pagers and car phones. But I kept on focusing on that goal. And I just kept telling everybody, how do I get there? How do I get there? And I kept asking, and then people were like, how did you get from customer service into training and development? And I said, I just asked, and I just kept on asking and telling people the path and working with them on their paths. And then all of a sudden, it just realized that I was coaching people at all different levels. And I had no idea what I was doing until somebody pulled me aside and they were like, you're career coaching. And I was like, I was doing the job of 3 people and only getting paid for 1? How is this possible?
Yeah.
And so I realized that, the results are what gave me the confidence to just kind of keep on going, because people were really going from point A to Z and, helping them. I was helping them along. And I felt like, you know what? I think there's a wider opportunity for me. After 20 years, doors stopped opening as readily after 20 years. I had grown my career. Sometimes you just outgrow the business. And so I thought, wow, why not spread the joy, so to speak, and open up my own coaching and consulting practice. And so, seeing those people grow, I like to say I grow leaders for a living. It's really happened that way from Elon to beyond. That whole leadership thread just kept on.
You bring up a great point about work, and this realization that it's a journey and a process, and how much we learn in those entry-level roles that really end up staging so much of our success later. just as an aside, because when you were talking, I'm sure being at the Verizon customer service on cell phones had challenging moments. When I was in high school, I worked at Kmart, which was in our neighborhood, and my job was the refunds at the service desk.
No.
And
Oh,
I tell
no.
people all the time, if you want to be able to talk to people while they're hot, while they're at a 10 and being upset, you should work the service desk
Indeed.
because you learn how to help people get from a 10 and say, hey, can we take it down a little to a 5? It ended up being, right, you learn so many skills in those professions that end up informing the rest of your work.
Indeed.
So that work, let's talk about your work today. So I know it includes everything from TED Talks to C-suite advice. Tell me, I suspect that leaders at all levels
Mhm.
actually come to you with some of the same challenges.
Mhm.
So, what is, when you think about the coaching you're doing as a toolbox, what are some of the tools that you find yourself taking out and showing people frequently when they come to you?
Well, my main toolbox is my framework, which is RISE. It's a RISE methodology. It's 4 steps. Anything like that I speak about or talk about, the coaching framework is right there. And it stands for reflect, identify, strategize, and execute. And reflection is such a super, super important tool for leaders to have at all levels, to take a step back, take a pause for the cause, assess what's going on, make sure they're realigning with their values, make sure that they're actively listening to what their, direct reports are saying, actually listening, reflecting on our own bodies, as we're leading teams and leading our lives. Sometimes we get so caught up in doing that we forget about being. And so I think it's so important to just stop and reflect. Other tool in that RISE toolkit is the execution piece, because we can have all these wonderful strategies and identify where we need to improve on, but taking that action is also a huge step in what I work with my clients at all different levels with. It's that step, that small step in holding ourselves accountable for the things that we need to do or improve on.
Students often ask me about this idea of action, and they'll ask me about courage or feeling anxious.
Mm,
And so I'm always like, they're like, do you feel uncertain? And I was like, yeah, 99% of the
yeah,
time I feel uncertain. And we try to teach students about living at the limit of their ability. Like, if you're in that space of really challenging yourself, you should feel a little anxious. You should
yeah,
feel a little nervous, right? That
yes.
because it's new territory that you're venturing into. But it does, working that muscle helps them, right? Helps me execute, getting comfortable. I like that. Somebody else also told me that self-awareness is a superpower. Uh,
Yes.
so that reflection piece you're describing, where, to really be aware of yourself in those moments.
Yeah. And I also feel like if we aren't in tune with ourselves, how are we going to be in tune with others? Like when we're listening and trying to respond, we're seeking to understand, right? So we need to make sure that we're living in empathy. Empathy is another tool that's so important in leadership, like kind of seeing other people's perspectives when we're trying to move forward. And that excitement, the worriness, the butterflies, that's just showing that you care. That's the empathy piece. So it's really important to keep tapping into that, because it can get lost in the sauce, especially when we're, moving forward. So
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I'm going to put that one in my pocket for today. Yeah, that those butterflies mean I'm connecting. Yeah, that's good. So tell me about your book. I know we had a good conversation, and I want people listening to hear a little bit about not just the title, "Show Your Ask," right? Which I always have to be very careful when I say it. But tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write that book, and I'm curious how it's doing. What now? It's been a few years, so tell us how it's
yeah.
doing.
Well, you know what? I wrote it because I kept on seeing so many talented people coming to me, and they're like, "I don't know, how did you do it? How did you figure it out?" They're picking my brain sessions, a lot of pick your brain sessions. How did you do it? How did you? And I'm just like, I just asked. Like I had this. I don't know whether it was just like me being young and not knowing any better or what have you, but I had this audacious goal, and I just had these blinders on, this like success blinders on, to just keep telling people this is where I want to go, and almost kind of seeing myself in the driver's seat of my career. And whoever I was reporting to was the GPS. They were the people, and I just calculated the route. And if the route was changing, I just recalculate the route and just tell them, okay, I don't want to go into comp and benefits. I don't want to learn about that. That's not where I want to go. This is where I want to go. And it was just having that realization that I can't coach the world. So maybe I need to put this all in a book. And so all these hard lessons that I learned, I was just like, well, you know what? I'm going to put it in a book, and maybe people can learn from it. And there's also reflection opportunities for people to kind of think about, where does this fall in my life? How is this going to work? And it's like an action plan. So it's not only like a hybrid memoir, but it's also a way for you can track all of your information and see how you can advocate for your career.
Curious, because I turned 60 this summer.
Happy birthday! I turned 50 this year, so look at that.
Okay, so milestones. And
Milestones.
I'm reading a book. It's by a priest, Richard Rohr, and it's called Falling Upward. And he wrote it in 2014, and it's about the second half of life. And I'm curious if you see generational changes in your work. We work with 18 to 22-year-olds largely on the undergraduate side here at Elon. Are you seeing differences in how what this rising generation is asking about in terms of leadership?
You know what? I feel like it's more of a communication style piece. Like, how do I communicate with other elder generations versus
Yeah. In the workplace, particularly, right?
Right. Like, I feel like it's more of a how do I communicate? How do I get them to hear what I'm trying to ask them for? Like, how do I advocate for myself in a way that they can hear it? Boundaries are a big thing that I hear a lot about, boundaries and the rules that we set. So I'm feeling a lot more of that from the younger generations that I work with, whereas in our generations that we're in, it's more of clarity on next steps, like maybe where am I now and where would I like to go? Like where am I? Can I bloom where I'm planted, or should I find any clarity on where I want to go next? So it's different. It's different styles, and I also noticed that older generations are dealing with imposter syndrome, whereas these younger generations, they
don't have it like we had
they
it.
know it. They know it. They've been here before, and they're just like, hurry up and get me where I need to go. So I do feel like it's just more of how do I crack the code to communicate with the people who are in power so I can move up, versus the people who are in power are like, should I be here? So it's a very interesting dichotomy of what I'm coaching, different age.
It is my daughter. She's 30. She has I struggle sometimes for words to describe some of the things I'm experiencing, and she has all the words, and I'm like, that generation there, this, you can feel the difference to your point. So I know you popped up on my feed because you were on Good Morning America. And so I was like, look at Joy. She's on the way to go, GMA. When you have those moments when you're so visible, I'm sure that has to be a moment in your career, right? And so can you tell me a little bit about that experience and how it went, what your takeaway was?
It's surreal. It's really surreal. And I find it interesting. Some of my friends, some of my oldest friends and family members are kind of apprehensive to reach out to me because they're like, oh, well, you're so busy, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm the same person that I have always been. Like, yeah, I was on television and I appreciate that. And I was able to promote my book and it's fabulous. But, to stay grounded, I need to remember it's not about the spotlight. It's about the service. Like my purpose in this world, I believe I was placed here to motivate and inspire others to take action in their careers and their lives, positive action. And so I always just try to remember that this is in service to others. Yes, I will bring it on. Put me on all the shows. I love it. The more exposure, the better.
Yeah. And that is really meaningful. Like that, I do believe the most meaningful lives are those that empower others, right then. So I know on campus you were a leadership fellow, sorority member. You had lots of roles in different student leader organizations. So when you look back at your time at Elon, what are some of the experiences here that have really been carried forward in all of your success?
Well, being that leadership fellow, that to get a scholarship to be a leader, that's like what a great thing, to have a school invest in your skills. It was my leadership lab. Elon was my leadership lab. And as a fellow, I learned to reflect on the values that I had and act on them. I learned about delegation. I learned about the importance of keeping people motivated and inspired. Like the teams, RHA, we had gone into the homecoming court. Like what? Like the first non-Penalletic group to be in homecoming. Like,
that's fun.
The sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, community, leadership, service to all mankind. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, across the campus, safe rides, Dandelion Theater, it was the foundation that showed me that leadership isn't about a title. It's really about showing up and creating space for others to shine and grow and rise. So I talk about Elon every day. There's never a time where I was just in London in June, and I hadn't been back to London since 30 years ago when I studied abroad.
Wow.
And it's always top of mind. It's always part of who I am. And I feel like it was the leadership lab. It was where I really was able to foster all of the skills and the talents that I had inside of me, and felt armed and guarded to do it and bring it out into the world.
That's really exciting. Next time I see President Fred Young, I'm going to tell him, Joy, that you said that. And I do think thinking about the campus experience as a lab is really a wise observation, because it is most young people's first time, right? Their first time leading an organization, their first time thinking about what they want to accomplish in life, So there's a lot of firsts. And to think of it as a lab recognizes that you're not going to do it perfectly. It is a learning lab, right? The lab is designed to test things and see what sticks,
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I'm so appreciative of the time today on Beyond the Bricks. I know your fellow alumni will be excited to hear from this, as well as our current students and parents. I get emails about Beyond the Bricks after people listen to some of the stories of our alumni. So I'm excited to be able to share your thoughts today with the community. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Joy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Elon Beyond the Bricks. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and leave a review to help others discover the conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.